scrutiny on, we suggested that the Cabinet member might want to review them, but Cabinet felt it more appropriate to push it back to the Scrutiny Committee to look at, and I don't know if we've had a response from the chairs of those scrutiny boards yet.
Well, that's something I can chase up, Chair. I'll have to check with my colleagues what they'll be going through their cycle of pre-meetings now and setting their work programmes. So I'll
and bring that back next time.
I'll chase that up with all those.
I appreciate that.
With my colleagues.
Anything other of note in the response from Cabinet? I think more or less everything else was accepted.
Yeah, I think it was a mixture of noting and accepting.
Any points to raise, members of the board, in relation to the Cabinet response? No, then we'll press on then, and we'll get straight on to the Council Cabinet agenda for Wednesday, the 12th, and look at the items that will be coming up there. Items 1 through 6 are the standard items. Item 7 is the recommendations from tonight's Exec Scrutiny Board, which will, if there are any, we'll forward them in advance. And actually, because we're doing it on a Monday now, there'll be an opportunity for a closer look at those over 48 hours rather than less than 24 hours, so that's good. Item 8 is the recommendations from the Children and Young People Board. Anybody want to present those, Gamal? Or can you tell us anything about those?
No, Chair, I need to take that back. I'm not aware of anything specific.
Okay, let's have a quick look at those then. We need to deal with it tonight, Stephen, don't we? Or at least look at it.
Chair, if I can assist you, it's a minute taken in the March meeting, which clearly was before the annual general meeting of the council. So what they discussed in March is just reporting on us here about the education, health and care plans. But what it says in the recommendation is that the board resolved to note it and to ask Cabinet to investigate the tribunals. In the penultimate paragraph, however, on the item 8, page 2, it does say a councillor spotlighted the current need for EHCPs at an earlier age, and a pilot scheme had been set up in a city ward. I was wanting to ask, if the officer isn't here, we can find out which ward it's being looked at, because clearly children's needs fluctuate whichever ward you live in. Just to look in one ward out of the 18 seems a bit bizarre. But
I think it's probably a small sample. Gamal, does that prompt your memory of that and what might be happening there?
No, I'm sorry, Chair, it doesn't really, if I'm honest, on that.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Councillor. It's helpful that you bring that up. But so we can certainly note the report and ask Cabinet that we can follow it up, or that this will be considered at Cabinet anyway.
So it will come back here at some point.
And so it will come back
you.
potentially here anyway at some point in the future. But there have been several developments in relation to the HCPs anyway, and I think there's more to come. So yeah, thank you. Okay, moving on then. So item 9 is a proposal to extend the age range and size of Kingsmead Special School.
Thank you, Chair.
To Gamal. He looks like he's expecting this one. So
yeah,
that's a start.
Yeah, I can help with this one, of course. Thank you, Chair. So briefly, this report is a proposal to extend the age range and size of Kingsmead Special School. As part of the Council's overarching SEND strategy, a proposal has been developed to permanently extend the age range of Kingsmead from 11 to 16 to 7 to 18. In other words, create an additional 20 primary places within years 5 and 6 and take the overall school capacity to 110. In addition to that, there are a small number of post-16 places also to be increased, 5 in total. as Kingsmead is a local authority maintained school in line with the process that's followed, Kingsmead School governing body have taken forward the consultation process. The report outlines the periods that consultation took place, including the statutory notice period from 27th of March to 24th of April. No comments or objections were received, and the Cabinet is the decision maker on the final proposal. And Chair, 1.6 in the report outlines the need for local placements for young people with social, emotional, mental health needs, and recommends that Cabinet approve the proposal, extend the age range to include that primary provision from September 2023. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Camille. So perfectly in line with the current policy and plan in terms of provision for young people with special needs. Yeah. Queries, questions for Camille? Yes.
Thanks for this. It seems to make good sense, but doesn't seem to cover here the capacity of the school in terms of its buildings and its staffing, particularly in terms of buildings. Schools tend to be of a finite built size. Is this going to require any capital changes to the school to accommodate them, and how much additional capacity beyond what's being proposed here would the school have if it does?
Thank you, Chair. As Kingsmead Special School also straddles what's called a pupil referral unit, they operate over multiple sites, and this proposal has actually been developed by the school itself. So some building work is proposed, which was approved as part of the SEND capital strategy. So in terms of not a multi-million-pound project, a small project with some extensions. But Chair, these primary places are likely to operate over a number of sites that are existing sites rather than any new site or significant extension.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's brilliant to see that Kingsmead School, I think this is possible for them. I think it'd be great to see how they can deliver that. Now, I'm not as familiar with this school as I am with others, so I just wondered how does the catchment work for this particular school, and do we foresee these changes having any impacts on catchments at all?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, Kingsmead School wouldn't have a catchment area. They tend to be titulars because they tend to be more from placement needs. And the pupil referral unit element is around alternative provision. So, Chair, good question, but there aren't catchment areas like traditional.
Brilliant, thanks, Camille. That's what I thought. I wasn't sure if these changes changed anything in any way. Thank you.
Effectively a citywide provision anyway, Camille. Right. Any other questions? No recommendations? We can resolve to note the report. Thank you. Item 11 then is Ashgate School. Yes, Camille's going to lead on this one too.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can draw the headlines out from this report. So this report relates to the completion of the statutory consultation outcome on the viability of Ashgate Nursery School. The report sets out the background that Ashgate Nursery is federated with Central Nursery School. Both Ashgate and Central Nursery School ended the financial years with significant deficits, and the backdrop to this is numbers falling, COVID issues across both schools in terms of the pandemic, and a reduction in additional childcare sessions. The council and the governing body have been working closely for a number of years, but the financial deficit has continued to increase. The statutory consultation ran, and that's now been closed, and there were 37 responses during the most recent consultation process statutory period, with those responses objecting to the closure of the nursery school. 1.6 of the report outlined, following a change in administration and further careful consideration of all the consultation responses, the report recommends that alternative options now developed to address the financial deficits at Ashgate and Central Nursery Schools, and that Ashgate Nursery School remain open. The report also, Chair, outlines under the legal section around working with the two schools to develop alternative options, but including outlining that the statutory powers to step in and to consider changes to the governing body, interim executive boards, and those types of arrangements if the process of seeking alternative options doesn't come into fruition. So, Chair, in terms of the recommendations themselves in the report, 2.1 is to approve a decision not to close Ashgate Nursery School, and 2.2 is to delegate authority to the Strategic Director for People Services in consultation with the Cabinet member to undertake an appraisal to develop options to address the financial deficits at Ashgate Nursery School and Central Nursery School. And Chair, final point I was going to outline in terms of the financial section outlines that the current position for the financial year 22-23 is that Ashgate Nursery School had a deficit of around 121,000 and Central Nursery School had a cumulative deficit of 277,000. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Gamal. A subject that's attracted quite a lot of interest. My understanding is a situation that's not new. There's been a running deficit for a while, and there have been a variety of attempts in the past to address those issues without success. Can you add any detail to that?
Yes, Chair. So certainly the Council and the governing body have been working closely over the last 12 months or so, and if not longer, to try and come up with a solution to the deficit, including discussions with the governing body around what the options could be, but those haven't come into fruition, Chair. And
usage and demand?
Sorry, usage and demand?
Usage and demand for the places at Ashgate at the moment?
Yeah, they're pretty much small growth rather than a significant shift. That position in terms of usage, demand and take-up is pretty consistent. And Chair, in terms of falling numbers across the sector in terms of primary birth data is there. And Chair, the other bit to add is Central and Ashgate have currently been partnered with another nursery school to do some comparator analysis around what kind of expenditure budget looks like in another 40-place nursery school or a similar sized nursery school in comparison to Ashgate and Central, and that element of work underway as well, which may kind of bring additional information in.
Okay, any thoughts, comments, questions? Councillor Holmes first thing.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one on the licensed deficit. There's a maximum 3 years that it could be in place. What happens if it isn't brought within threshold after that 3-year period?
I'll pick that one up, Chair. So that's obviously, it's not compliant with the scheme for funding schools. That's our current scheme. That's the Derby City Council scheme for funding schools, though, and it's non-compliant. So we'll do whatever we can to get the school to operate within those constraints. But as I said, that's non-compliant as it stands at the moment in terms of its budgetary position.
So but what happens if it doesn't if it's not brought in threshold within that period?
There's no sanctions. We would just work with the school. What we would do in those situations, as outlined in the report, there's a range of interventions that the council could do to ensure that that's brought back in as soon as possible.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Clearly this is an excellent report. I'm pleased it's come and that we have saved the nursery following the change of administration and further consideration of all the consultation responses. Both nurseries are in areas of deprivation, particularly Ashgate Nursery. It serves a community with significant levels of economic disadvantage and families that need support. So I think this is an excellent report and one that I welcome.
Just an observation, it's not yet saved if we're still looking at ways of saving it, but yes, Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. You preempted a bit of the points I want to make there, because I think we really, as a scrutiny board, it is our job to examine what a report is actually saying to us, not what we may want it to be saying. We need to examine what it actually does say. And I want to be very, very clear at the start of my contribution to this meeting for the benefit of everyone in scrutiny, and I see our colleagues in the press in the gallery as well. No one ever wants to see a nursery close. No one ever wants to see that. I certainly don't want to see that. I don't believe anyone would. But we have to acknowledge what this report actually does. And in order to do that, I thought I'd bring a prop with me to make it a bit clear. And I know it drew the attention of Councillor Lindsay a few minutes ago, but I brought an apple with me. Other fruit and veg are available, but I've got one with me. You can see it in my hand and it's very clearly visible. In my other hand, I brought a representation of me deciding I want an apple and my decision to commence undertaking an appraisal to develop the option to address my ability to have an apple. They are not the same thing. There's an apple in one hand and there is not in the other. I might want them to be. I might want an apple in this hand. But any series of things could come up to prevent me from having that, chiefly a financial deficit. I hope that explains those two things clearly enough. I'm happy to re-go through that if anyone doesn't believe they are different things. Now, prior to the publication of this report, I saw a few things on social media that said this report was going to contain a tangible solution, something we could clearly see, a long-term plan and proposal. Now, I was really excited about that. I was really looking forward to seeing that. But I don't think that's what this report contains. Recommendation 2.1 is what's being clung to, and that's what fuels the argument that says that we've saved the nursery. But it negates the fact that the only reason this nursery was in the proposal that was in previously is the serious financial deficits that have been rung up and the change of use of this facility, which is detailed in the report. It talks about the impact of COVID-19, the impact of increased working from home and other changes that have severely impacted these two nursery schools. And in order to have that argument of the nursery is now saved, which again, is something everybody would want to see, there has to be a plan to reverse those changes and reverse the deficits that are there, a plan to rectify this and secure the long-term future. That's what the administration is trying to tell us is in this report, but I don't think that's what we're actually seeing in the wording of this report. And to claim that is what's there, I think is, in my opinion, at best a misleading statement, or at worst, it's willfully attempting to con the public. The financial circumstances of both of these nurseries, we can't just write that off because we want to. We've got to consider what position that leaves us in. So let's just, as is the job of the scrutiny board, let's scrutinise that recommendation 2.2. And at this stage, just remind ourselves that the deficits that we've actually been told are the figures. 121,295 for Ashgate Nursery School and 277,846 at Central. So we're talking just shy of £400,000. It's not pennies, it's significant amounts of money. And looking at that recommendation at 2.2, if we turn back to 1.3 of the report, we're told that the council has worked together with the governing body of Ashgate Nursery School and Central Nursery School to try to find a solution, but the financial deficit has continued to increase over the years. And it's repeated similarly in 4.3, where we're told the council and the two nursery schools have been working closely together to establish a deficit recovery plan, but this has not been possible due to the scale of the deficit, which has continued to increase over the years. Now, the worry I take from that is this proposed solution, which again, no apple, the solution isn't there in those terms, looks to be something we've already tried to do and that wasn't successful. And not only wasn't successful, didn't mitigate the deficits. The deficits continued to go up. So whatever's included in this solution, whatever those words may actually mean, and we can debate that all night long, whatever those words may actually mean, we can't just repeat what we've done and hope it's going to work, because we've shown that when we did that, it didn't actually decrease the deficit. Never mind get us out of the deficit, it didn't decrease it. And we can't bank on that working this time with no track record of success. And we can't allow the administration to get away with trying to do that. I think we should also refer ourselves to 8.3, where we're told that school deficits are above the deficit threshold and we're unable to provide a recovery plan to balance the budget within 3 financial years. So again, we can argue that even if some way can be found, and again, if the solution is to do what we've done before, it didn't work, but we're not going to see anything in any immediate term. It's not going to be the case that, 3 weeks' time, we can have us out of the deficits. We're talking long periods of time, because from my reading of that is that the actual schools don't foresee the way out of this, but they're willing to give it another try, as any governing body of any school would be. But again, the history of what's been tried has not shown successful. But despite this, we're being told, and we've just been told again, that it's all done and dusted. I cannot find a way to read this report except for wishful thinking where I can come to that same conclusion. And I repeat, again, no one ever wants to see nurseries close. No one ever wants to see that. I certainly don't want to see that. But it would be worse to lose 2 nursery schools because of politically motivated decisions on admittedly very emotional and difficult topics, but where we failed to address budget deficits at educational establishments. Now, the original plan, as is known, was to safeguard one nursery's future by losing another. Far from an ideal plan, but it was a plan that essentially combined the two and pooled the resources, which there's a logic to that. It makes sense if you have 2 facilities at around half capacity to put them together. It's, again, far from ideal, but a £400,000 deficit is far from ideal. The administration's clearly decided to go a different way, and they'll instead pursue this other strategy, but we cannot not take note. As a scrutiny board, we cannot not take note of serious financial implications of this. And I do have a couple of questions for you, Gamal, and I really appreciate the position you're in here with the change of administration that's occurred. But I'll put them one at a time, Chair, if that's okay. So in order to bring these significant financial deficits down, are cuts likely to be needed at either of the 2 nursery schools?
Chair would say that is likely in view of the size of the deficit. What those cuts and changes could be, we can't say until we've taken forward recommendation 2.2 in the report. And Chair, as I outlined earlier, a piece of work is already underway to look at some comparative costs with a similar size nursery school who is supporting the existing 2 nursery schools to look at that. But Chair, in terms of the deficit position is significant, and therefore significant changes would be needed in order to address that deficit. And Chair, that includes a reduction in expenditure, and therefore, cuts as outlined is the only way to try and achieve that balance, or an increase in numbers if that materialises in September and so forth.
Thank you, Gamal. And again, I entirely appreciate the position that you're in, but where, again, we haven't got officers are not in a position at this point to give us exactly what would be needed. So again, I have to question the mantra that's coming from the administration that this is the done and dusted point of it. And again, so does the council have the ability to remove any existing governing body at the school to make financial decisions with a view to deficit reduction?
Thank you, Chair. And that's outlined within 9.2 of the report. The Council has legal options that it can undertake in relation to changes to the governing body if required, with the withdrawal of delegated powers, or establish an interim executive governing board for day-to-day management of the schools, including financial management. But Chair, to outline recommendation 2.2 as a starting point is around that appraisal, to look at other options. But Chair, the legal point does outline that the Council does have statutory powers to make changes, structural changes to the governing body by introducing executive boards and those types of forums.
Thank you, Gamal. And I'm assuming that the governing body at the school will be aware of that, won't they?
Yes, they are, Chair. This report has been shared with them, and there have been some discussions with them in relation to the content of the report.
Okay, thanks, Gamal.
Just before you carry on,
Yes.
Matt, Gamal, appraisal and comparative nurseries and looking for new ways of making savings is one thing, but there doesn't seem to be solutions in this report, and there's certainly not solutions. And what's new here? What is there new in terms of this report compared to what was brought forward in the original report?
Chair, there is no new information in this report. What this report is outlining that in that particular recommendation is further work will be undertaken to look at whether there are any other options to recover that deficit. And one of those, of course, is, as I've outlined, is to do further work with a comparative size nursery school. But in terms of the chair, this report wasn't to set out the solutions. There are two recommendations, Chair, as outlined at 2.1, 2.2. So this report wasn't to set the solutions out. There may be further reports that seek to do that.
So if that proves not to be possible, what then?
I think we're preempting 2.2. I would refer to the legal section if what we're proposing, and currently proposing recommendation, doesn't come forward, to sort of see whether the council takes some of those measures that are outlined in 9.2, I think it is, to almost use its statutory powers to then look through that lens around what is possible to try and keep the two schools open and also develop the recovery plan.
Yes, Councillor, was there anything else?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So with everything that we've discussed so far, I'd like to propose a recommendation.
Yeah, Chair, I think Councillor Kerr wanted to speak.
Yep,
so
happy for you to go to anyone else that's
relevant
waiting.
to that, then we'll come back to any recommendations.
Happy for you to go to anyone else, Chair.
Councillor Kerr?
Yeah, thank you. I'm quite concerned that this situation has been, it's not something that's just arrived, it's been something that's built up over 3 or 4 years, but yet we've got the guidance, and it's repeated here, and it's in the Harrington Nursery report as well, that there should be a budget that is set to balance, and if it isn't set to balance, it needs to be shown how it can be brought back into balance within 3 years, and it should never go above 5% of budget. This is way over that, and I'm concerned that despite having the sanction system, that has not been effective in enabling these schools to be operated in a managed manner. And so my first question is really, is the process of saying that we have a licence deficit limit actually doing the job, and do we need to review that? Would you like me to pick up the other points now, or go one at a time, Chair? Do you want to pick up that one first? Okay.
I think in the main, the licence deficit framework works really well. This is the only situation that I've ever experienced where that hasn't enabled a school to come into the balanced budget within the 5% or the 3 years as stipulated within the scheme for funding schools.
Okay. But, Chair, my second point is that we now have this deficit, around £400,000, I think, between the two schools, and somebody has to pay for that. And that has to come out, presumably, from the school's budget. The council doesn't have any money sloshing around, as we know. Budgets are really tight. So that will have to be paid for from somewhere within the ring-fenced school's budget. Whether that comes from within the early years part of that funding, or whether it comes from the wider school's funding, I'm not clear about, but I think it will have to be one of those. There only are about just under 4,000 nursery pupils across the city. So this budget is equivalent to about £100 for every child, nursery-age child in the city, that is being misspent by two nursery schools. Now, I'm a great believer in nursery schools. My children weren't able to access a nursery school because of where I live. The situation is far, far better now. But they need to be managed in a way that is fair to every child in the city and not just to the children at a particular nursery school. So I'm concerned there's nothing in this report that talks about the way in which these schools are actually impacting on the education of other children within the city because of their failure to manage budget. And my second question is, who is paying for this deficit, and what budget does it come out of? And why hasn't that been discussed in this report?
Very clear questions there, Gamal or Alison, for which you might want to... I'll start, and then if Alison wants to add anything to that. And Chair, I'm not trying to deflect away, but the recommendation in the report is to undertake further work around what are the alternative options to try and achieve that deficit recovery. in line with schemes of delegation and finance and procedure rules around licence deficits. Importantly, that work will be developed quickly, and should the council form a view that structural changes are needed in order to make the necessary changes in order to ensure the deficits don't increase or impact on other schools, then the legal aspect of the report would be considered in making necessary changes to try and bring that deficit and licence deficit to a more manageable position and reducing any impact on other schools.
I see the 2 points to this really. One would be, at the very least, it's a budget pressure. There's £400,000 that we've got to spend that we hadn't budgeted to spend, and or it needs to be found from somewhere else. But even worse is the potential for the education or the nursery services to the other 4,000 pupils in the city being seriously affected, and pressures being added to other nurseries that are operating appropriately.
Yeah, Chair, I guess what I would add is this report isn't setting out a position in the sense of that licence deficit or the deficit of just under 400,000 will be written off either by the DSG or the council. What this report is outlining is that options will be considered in order to develop a recovery plan, and there are statutory powers that the council will also consider in order to bring that budget position in terms of a recovery plan and a licence deficit approach. So certainly, Chair, the report isn't outlining a position whereby the council or the dedicated schools grant is going to write off £400,000 of overspend, because that would be, of course, impacting on other schools as well.
So that the fact then is that it's not a solution, and the assumption from that, or the clear picture out of that, is that Ashgate Nursery is not necessarily safe, as some people would have you think. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. If I may ask Gamal, so we're talking in 2.2, we just discussed the options that will be developed very quickly, and they need to be. Is there anything that you can offer us in terms of what some of those potentially could be? Because I'm quite interested in to know what practical measures officers are considering to bring the deficit down, because they need to be fairly drastic, I would imagine, to make it work.
Thank you, Chair. There's no current options being considered, but what I can say, Chair, is over the last 12 months, through a corporate approach with the governing body, we looked carefully in partnership around what those drastic options could be because of the scale of the deficit. And therefore, Chair, in terms of that solution wasn't found, and Chair, it is important to note that by consolidating on one site, that would be just one component. That would not in itself achieve a balanced budget. So that was just one component of a number of factors. In terms of specifics, yes, detailed discussions have taken place over 12 months, jointly developing scenarios, but a balanced position couldn't be found, and some of those could have a significant impact and would need some structural changes to try and achieve. And that's why, Chair, that comparator exercise that's now underway, again, in some ways, is to look at similar sized nursery school and a peer support as well on that.
So it wasn't the total solution, but it was part of a plan. Okay, Councillor Mulhall.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, 2.1, to approve a decision not to close Ashgate Nursery School. How can we logically do that, realistically, when we have no way, as far as I can see, of funding it, or no way of, at the moment at least, reducing the service that Ashgate provides? Because that realistically is the two options we're going to have. They're, tough decisions. It's either going to be taking money from somewhere else to fund it, or drastically reducing the service it provides, to which point it's It's just it's an empty vessel. It's a ship with no crew, essentially. And then why would we keep it? Why would we keep it open? It's just it's completely daft.
Okay, so Councillor Eyre, you wanted to propose a recommendation, did you? You've got one as well.
Yes, thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
let's hear them both and then we'll decide.
So, I mean, Councillor Kerr outlined some very clear financial hits that we can expect to see on this decision. I'm not going to rehash all of them. So just quickly to repeat again, that there's no set out plan, there's an intention, but there is no plan. We don't know what will or won't be cut, we don't know if it will work, we don't know if keeping the nursery open is even achievable, and many of the root causes of where we've got to are out of the council's control entirely. But the administration have laid their stall out, their intent on keeping both nurseries open, whether that could mean they're open in name only, as they're cut left, right and centre, and we remove individuals who are there. So in order to pursue this, I don't believe the administration should be permitted to take money from other educational establishments who've made difficult decisions and strived hard to manage their own budgets and their own deficits. Their efforts and determination shouldn't be punished by any decision that's made here. So, Chair, the recommendation I would like to propose is that no cuts or closures be made to Central Nursery School or any other nursery school or educational establishment to divert funding for Ashgate Nursery School. If the administration truly believes there's the financial viability in Ashgate Nursery School and that they've already saved it, despite everything this report contains, everything that's already been tried in the past, and everything they will have been told previously, they've no reason at all not to approve that recommendation. But if it's rejected by the Cabinet, then I think we should take that as clear indication that other educational facilities are set to be cut to fund a nursery school with significant financial deficits. And I believe Councillor Mulhall is willing to second me on this.
I am indeed.
Stephen, I'll send it over to you now.
Chair, could you switch your microphone on?
Oh, sorry.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
My recommendation, Chair, was to say that the Cabinet is provided with details and then considers the financial impact on all other nurseries and on every early years pupil of keeping the Ashgate Nursery open. So in some ways it covers similar ground, but this is saying actually Cabinet haven't asked for the right information on what they're doing and more information is needed. It's the same subject from a different direction. And my view, and obviously, Chair, you've been at the receiving end of recommendations much more recently than I have, is that Cabinet are more likely to accept something if it is done in an informative way rather than an instructive way.
I don't wish to make Councillor Eyre's case for him, but I think rather than instructive, it's that we're asking them to consider. Can you change the wording of that? I mean, I'm not opposed to putting both recommendations forward and explaining the difference and going from there. Is that okay? Okay. Right, anything else to say on those recommendations?
Chair, have we got a seconder for Councillor Kerr's?
You've got several seconders. Yes, Councillor
Can I
Bolt.
come in? Because I think I didn't mention politics at all. My concerns are for the children and families who use these nurseries. I have not made it political. What we've heard in the last 23 minutes and 50 seconds is a purely political attack because there's been a change of administration and the administration that was in prior to the Labour Party being in, we've reversed it. That is all this is about. We are not considering the families who use these establishments. They need the help. If you look under 2.2 of the recommendation, in my view, this will be coming back to us because we're given All we're doing under 2.2 is an appraisal to develop options. Surely it will be coming back. Now, if you look on page 3 of the initial consultation, 91% of the people who use the nursery were objecting to it closing. We are listening to the people. Surely if this was in Oakwood Ward or Chaddesden Ward, are you looking supercilious for some reason? I'm just telling you the facts, Councillor Poulter. This is a serious issue with the cost of living crisis that we've got. We need to care for the families and children in the city. And it's a shame that this now has become a political debate. I respectfully request councillors to think of the area this is in, the challenging families that we have, and the life expectancy of these children. They need the care, and it's a shame that this topic has now become a political football.
I hear what you say, Councillor Bolton, but when you started off, there were several hands went up in the background, and I think the argument would be that it's far from political. If it was clearly stated that to close any nursery is undesirable, but this report doesn't offer a solution to the proposal that was put forward, and it certainly is not a saviour of Ashgate Nursery. Anything you want to add, Councillor, before I move
Yes,
on?
thank you, Chair. I've never before heard someone start their speech with "we've saved something" and then accuse someone else of being political. Yes, my response would be I'm exactly considering the parents and the pupils who are at this school by saying it is not correct to tell them something when the report that supposedly does it has been shown not to do it and actually contains no plan. And we've already heard that there are that many proposals to put the cuts into Ashgate Nursery. With the amount that is considered there, we may well see a scenario where the nursery is open in name only. I'm not prepared to support that and put my name to that, and I don't think this Scrutiny Committee should either. I think we should properly scrutinise the specific wording of what comes to this board. That's what I've done.
Okay, so we've got two recommendations in respect to that, Mr Mason. Have you got the sufficient detail just to repeat them for us? Waiting for it to come
Councillor
through
Kerr, were you changing yours?
No, I've sent it through to you that the Cabinet is provided with details and then considers the financial impact on all nurseries and on every early years pupil of keeping the Ashgate Nursery open.
And yours, Councillor, just to repeat it.
Mine was that no cuts or closures be made to Central Nursery School or any other nursery school or educational establishment to secure funding for Ashgate Nursery School.
As I say, I'm prepared to put both forward because there are slightly different nuances to it. Those in favour of Councillor Kerr's recommendation? Those against? Okay, that's passed. Are those in favour of Councillor Ayres' recommendation? Those against? That's also passed. Okay. We'll move on from item 10, as it was, to item 11, the Food Safety, Food Standards, Animal Feed and Health and Safety Service Plan. Yes. Ms. Phelan, could you just do me a favour and announce your position, your role in this?
Which is obvious to this report, clearly, Chair. Hello, good evening, committee. I am Emily Feenan. I am the Directorate of Corporate Governance, Property and Procurement. And I'm presenting this report in the absence of specific colleagues from this service who've been unable to join us this evening. This is a standard report that comes here to committee every year, and it's to seek, and the report seeks approval for the adoption of the Food Safety, Food Standards, Animal Feed and Health and Safety Service Plan for 23-24. This is a statutory requirement and sets out the Council's regulatory function in these service areas. As set out in the report, the Council is required to prepare a documented plan for food safety, food standards, animal feed and health and safety, and it does have a duty to enforce and set out, and so this report sets out, this plan sets out how the authority intends to deliver its official controls and enforcement responsibilities within the city. And as previously mentioned, this is a plan which comes to Council every year. This year is in the same format as previous years and has merely been updated to reflect latest policies and procedures, Chair. So I would ask committee to note recommendations 2.1 to adopt the plan, 2.2 to continue to support the food and safety team and trading standards team in their duties imposed on the authority by the Food Standards Agency and the Health and Safety Executive, and to authorise the Director of Public Protection and Street Pride in consultation with a Cabinet member to agree any necessary changes to the report, to the plan as the year passes by. Happy to take any questions, but I may need to take those back to colleagues to get full answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, queries? Bearing in mind Ms Feenan's position on this, you may have to go elsewhere for further advice. Yes, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. And I'm afraid this report shows that it has been a roll forward from one year to the next. And it still refers to Public Health England, which hasn't existed since 2021, I believe. The organisational chart admits it's April 22, but is going to be updated. There is reference to a European legislation, which will now have been subsumed into UK legislation. So I was going to suggest that recommendation 2.3, Cabinet should delete the word subsequent amendments to this year's food safety on the beginning of the third line, so that the Director of Public Protection and Street Pride can agree any amendments as necessary, and it can be actually updated before it's formally approved, because I think at the moment it doesn't quite, all the updating that was required hasn't yet gone forward. I also, Chair, have some concerns that we are not making as fast a recovery from the COVID situation, and the inability to really catch up on the position that I would hope us to be in may need a bit more work doing, and that is something that the Cabinet member needs to be alerted to. Now, whether that should be added as an additional recommendation from ourselves, I'm relaxed about, but I'm pleased to have voiced it. But really, I think we need to get some amendments done to this document, as I've highlighted, before it is actually published. Thank you.
Okay, Ms Feenan, I think probably the appropriate way forward here is to point out the updates that are required. And does that removal of that word subsequent in that recommendation, does that give you the space to be able to do that?
It does, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. And your second part of that, Lucy, was?
It was about the need to make sure that we're making enough progress since COVID's disruption. I'm happy to leave it with the officers to make that small amendment.
If somebody takes that back to the officers as a advice or thoughts, then that's fine. So we don't actually need a recommendation on that point. Any other questions or queries? No? But in that case, we can agree to note the report. Any other comments? All in favour? Yep. Nobody against? Good. So then, we'll move on to item 13 and compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. Alison. Oh, sorry, I missed that. Yeah, skip that. It's item 12, rightly. Derby Youth Justice Service Plan, which is Gamal.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to approve the annual Youth Justice Plan to enable the Council to receive Youth Justice Board funding for Derby's Youth Offending Service this financial year. Chair, the context is that the Youth Offending Service is our statutory multi-agency team who supervise young people who have received a youth court sentence. The grant will be approximately £500,000 per annum. However, the Ministry of Justice have not yet confirmed the exact amount, and we expect confirmation in the next month or so. This is the first time, Chair, that the Youth Justice Plan has needed to be signed off by Council Cabinet. in previous years it was signed off by the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. Chair, the Annual Justice Plan provides an overview of key services that are delivered to meet the 3 performance indicators that all the youth-friendly services are measured against. One is around prevent offending and first-time entrance to the youth justice system. 2, prevent reoffending. And 3, reduce use of custody, Chair. The plan itself sets out comprehensively the local arrangements in relation to governance, partnership, performance, insight and metrics. And Chair, the report and the accompanying plan provides further detail and content.
Thank you, Gamal. It is a long plan. It looks detailed. It looks like it's been modernised and updated, and it's an essential document to be able to follow the normal processes. Has anybody thought so? Sorry, Gamal, you want to come back?
No, Chair, I was just going to say you're absolutely right there. Comprehensively developed across the partnership and the wider system, and this is in the format of content required by the Ministry of Justice. And agreed and written and documented by those that would have previously approved it as well, and the officers, the senior officers involved. So, any thoughts, comments on this one? No. Okay, then we can agree to note the report. Agreed? Good. Then I can then move on to item 13, which is compliance contract financial procedure rules. Alison, yeah?
Thank you, Chair. The first item in this report is in relation to some external funding, 270,000 for a project called Staying Close offer for the care experienced young people. We made a bid for national funding for the Staying Close programme, and that funding is to offer extended support for young people who are care experienced and have spent a period of living in residential care to reduce the risks of eviction and homelessness in later life. And this is a funding stream from the Department for Education. The plan in regard to the Staying Close programme would be recruiting on a fixed term basis 2 full-time equivalent personal advisors who would lead on transition to support young people, and a part-time fixed term therapeutic social worker to oversee the operational work. And the programme will support 10 young people over the course of 2 financial years. The second part of the report is in
Sorry, Alison, can we just deal with them individually quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Any questions? No? Good, sorry, thank you. So, licence deficit for Harrington Nursery School?
Yes, so this is a licence deficit for Harrington Nursery School. As we've discussed earlier in the agenda, the parameters for licence deficit is 3 years up to a maximum permitted allowable deficit of 5% of the school budget. This school has requested a licence deficit of 19,000 for just one financial year, 23-24, which represents 4.9% of their annual revenue budget. And that's to cover restructuring which is necessary to future-proof the nursery. The school will plan to have removed the deficit by the end of 24-25.
Thoughts or comments? Other than the fact that it's in the context of the previous item on Ashgate School, then obviously other nurseries in the city would have difficulty absorbing extra difficulties for as a result of subsidising Ashgate Nursery, but okay. The next one, Alison, is Parks and Open Space.
Yes, so this is an addition to the capital programme, excuse me, of £24,000 for a zip wire and balance beam at Sinfin Moor Park. So this is a result of the community carried out a consultation with the local community. 136 responses were received, of which 99.3 of them the residents supported the installation of the zip wire. Sinfin Moor Park and the local nature reserve Friends Group have been raising funds for the play area improvements, and the council's to receive £24,000, a contribution from Derby Homes of £10,000, and the and the Friends Group 14,000 to finance these proposed improvements.
Any comments or questions? No? So, Quad. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to applaud the community work that's going on there between those Friends of Parks groups, and I think that they show real dedication to their local areas, and I feel there ought to be some learning that they can share with other Friends of Parks groups as well. So I just really want to say it's a really good news story and thank them for it.
I'd agree, but they're not on their own. There are other parks and Friends of Parks groups developing and making a great contribution.
Absolutely, and if we have things coming through exec scrutiny to Cabinet, we can applaud them as well.
Sorry, yes, Alison, Quad.
There's an item just before that in relation to Chaddesden Park, so along a similar theme, Friends of Chaddesden Park, a proposal there of 17,000 to fund play area improvements in that particular area.
So just on that, Lucy, do you want to offer a recommendation to recognise the work of Friends of Parks groups in the city and their contribution to the developments of our parks? Yeah. So we'll ask Cabinet to publicly welcome and recognise the efforts of all parks, Friends of Parks groups, and the contribution they make to us. Could you just do that and send it to Christine? Okay. Can that recommendation be agreed? Yep. Okay. Sorry, Alison. Go on.
Thank you, Chair. The next item on the report is in relation to the proposal of a loan to Quad for 150,000. As you know, the Quad is a key cultural organisation providing opportunity for engagement in visual art, film education. It does sit within the marketplace, within the city centre. However, recently the audience agency data from Spring 23 has highlighted that there's been compounding pressures facing the arts and cultural organisations and the slow return post-pandemic for some attending those cultural events. In response to that, the Quad is therefore implementing an organisational review to address the short-term budgetary shortfall and establish the longer-term sustainability. The proposal in this report is to support the cash flow during the delivery of that recovery process in the provision of a loan that has been requested from the City Council.
Thank you, Alison. I think we all recognise the contribution of the Quad and the difficulties in its current location and the footfall and everything that's prompted these difficulties. But we have been here before with Quad in terms of loans and grants and things. Are you satisfied that the proposals for the business plan for recovery are sufficient?
Absolutely, Chair. I have personally been over to the Quad to meet with their management team and to do the due diligence required around their business plans. We've already seen some implementation around restructures and operating models that have already starting to see a return. So yes, to answer your question, we are confident of those proposals. We have the loan has got a review period in the autumn, so we were to gain access to the ongoing operations of the Quad to be able to establish the sort of ongoing deliverability of those business plans as well.
So that there will be an update, a report brought back with progress on the plan?
Absolutely, quite more than happy to do that.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Bolton.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Obviously Quad does offer an arts contribution to the city, I think mentioned under 451 we have the cost of living crisis. A lot of the people I represent wouldn't be able to afford to go to the quad. And I'm conscious that this is a loan. Obviously, we do want it returned, but have Quad ever done a census on how many people in the city actually use it? Or are a lot of their customers coming from out of the city? I'd be interested to know where the audience primarily comes from, because, as I said earlier, the cost of living crisis, a lot of people can't afford to eat and eat, never mind go and enjoy the art. So I very much like to see a project by Quad to ascertain who actually visits them and whether they are actually city residents.
In your experience, Alison, is that part of what their considerations are?
Yes, I mean, obviously I don't have those details to hand, but they are very, in terms of some of the activities that I've seen, they're very, very inclusive, particularly within school holidays, for example, with activities that are happening within the marketplace. I think their operating model is definitely around more that inclusion agenda, as well as the traditional aspects of the delivery of the quad.
My experience is they're very cost conscious, and the exhibitions in the hall are often free.
Yes, they are, yes.
Councillor Kerr.
But Chair, I would hope that a lot of the people coming to Quad are actually from outside the city, bringing funding from outside the city and spending it within the city, because that helps keep us a more vibrant area.
Councillor Holmes, then Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. I would have hoped that all councillors realise how important culture is for every city, especially Derby. It's something that we really do need to invest in. I accept Councillor Bolton's comments that there is hardship in Derby as well as elsewhere in the country, but we mustn't lose sight of supporting culture in the city. It's not necessarily specific to this, but I think in general we cannot lose sight of that. It's very, very important. It's been proven time and time again that every pound you put into culture in your city, it comes back maybe 5 or 6 times that in terms of economic benefits. Economic benefits drives benefits wider across the city, socio-economic as well. So for me, I'm not really commenting on the whys and wherefores of why the Quad needs a loan again, but I strongly support culture in the city, and Quad is playing an important part in the city centre at the moment, Chair.
Councillor Rawson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, from 2 points of view, really. From the cultural point of view, Quad does make a big contribution to the city, and also from the economic and the regeneration point of view as well. The marketplace is struggling for footfallers. Many of us will know when we take a walk outside of this building. So to lose the Quad would, on top of the other challenges that the city centre has, I think would be wrong. So I do support this loan to enable the Quad to continue what they're doing, and agree as well actually with Councillor Bolton in terms of the cost of living, and at the moment it is very difficult for a lot of people to be able to afford to go out and have a night out, but hopefully this loan will mean that the Quad are able to continue to offer something for everyone in the city as well as people from outside, and we'll hopefully then make sure that the Quad's secured for the future as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any recommendations out of all that? No? Okay. Does that finish your...
It just might be worth adding on this as well. I didn't highlight it in the report, so apologies. But on the Quad aspect, we do yield council non-domestic rates as the fact that it's operational and open within the city centre. So there is a financial benefit to it being operational, as well as the cultural aspects that it offers to the city.
And as we said previously, they have been subject to previous loans and grants, but I think with the promise of an update in the autumn progress report, I think we could just note this report. Is that okay? Okay. Moving on then to item 14, the annual report and review of performance. So do you want to give name, rank and number, and make sure your patients are waiting tonight?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so I'm Sarah Walker, I'm the Head of Strategy and Performance and Partnership. So this is a report that really follows on from the year-end performance report and financial reports that were considered at the last scrutiny meeting. We don't have a statutory duty to publish an annual report, but it is good practice to do so to ensure that we can inform both the public and our stakeholders around some of the key areas that we have delivered, recognise the achievements not just of our own colleagues but of where we have worked collectively with partners across the city to deliver in priority areas, and also reflect on things that we know we need to continue to drive forward improvements in going forward. So the report presents an overview of key activities that have been delivered over the last 12 months, ending in March 2023. It is positioned alongside the commitments that we made in our council plan and the supporting council delivery plan, which is reported through to our cabinet colleagues and yourselves at the end of every quarter. So obviously this sits alongside that. The summary document is presented within Appendix 1, and within Appendix 2 there is a full overview of all commitments that were made as part of the council delivery plan, both milestones and performance measures, priority projects and strategic risks, which provides that comprehensive overview from a governance perspective of what has been delivered, what the progress has been in key areas and what our strategic risks have been. Cabinet colleagues are asked to note the annual report and the annual review of performance, and I should also highlight that it is considered by our Audit and Governance Committee as part of our overall governance framework in terms of understanding how we are working to deliver value for money. I'm really happy to take any questions on either document, both of which will be published on the website by the end of July following all committee meetings.
Thank you, Sarah. I, for one, appreciate the work that goes into this and analysing the progress in relation to the annual and presenting an annual report and review of performance. It is detailed. Some people would say it's marking your own homework or whatever, but I know that's not the way we do it. That we are a critical friend to ourselves, but also that it spells out in the recommendations the reason for it, or the reasons for it are to inform the public and key stakeholders about what we've achieved over 2023, 2022, 2023, but also to recognise the commitment and achievements of not just officers, but partnership working in the city to take the city forward at what has been and still is extremely challenging times. So thank you for all that. But it also is necessary, as it's not a legal requirement, it's necessary, in my view, too, to evidence the best value duty that we have in the city. So, from me, if you could take the message back, thank you. I'd appreciate that. Any comments, thoughts on this? Yes, Councillor Kerr.
I also welcome having a document like this so that you've got something to look back on as a summary, and I think looking back at this historic document in 10, 15, 20 years' time is probably as valuable as it is now. I've no idea how much readership documents like this get from our website. I suspect it isn't very large, and therefore I'm quite surprised on the assessment in the climate implications, where we've got a +17 in terms of influence. I think we might be being a little optimistic on that figure, but the full details of the climate implications analysis aren't here, so I can't go beyond that. Thank you.
Did you want to come back on that, Sarah? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The climate impact assessment aligns to that which we monitor as part of the performance reports at the end of each quarter, and is set in the context of the ambitions of the council plan and council delivery plan. I think the largest number of areas where we consider there be implications is around how the challenge that we promote as part of the delivery of both the performance framework but also our assurance activities in relation to programmes and projects is seeking to raise the profile and support in the achievement of our green theme and the supporting outcomes. So that's the basis for the assessment from a climate impact assessment, and that's why it's all very focused in one area, recognising that from a delivery perspective, it's the activities that are contained within the plans which are going to mitigate from a climate perspective.
Thank you. So in terms of readership and reading and influence of such reports, I'd make a plea to those, we still do have somebody from the media present, to occasionally take up on these more positive aspects of the papers that come towards Cabinet and Council, and actually use them as a positive for the public to understand and recognise some of the work that goes on. So we can take that message back and put that out through our communications team. I'm sure we will be putting these out in some detail. So again, thank you, Sarah. Any other comments, questions? No, thank you. And thank you for your patience. Okay, so that leads us to item 15, which is to consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following item. That under 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following item on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Before we agree that recommendation, that resolution, Ms. Feeling, could you just explain or put on record the reason for not providing a public report, white paper on it?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is a highly confidential report, the content of which is extremely sensitive. I have given the careful consideration to whether it be possible to have a public report on this matter, and unfortunately, I do not believe that that is possible on this occasion. In my view, the risks, the benefit of maintaining confidentiality far outweigh the public interest in publishing a public report or having a public debate on this matter, given the potential for inadvertent disclosure of confidential information in the discussion of that report. And therefore, I've concluded that it's not in the Council's best interest to have a public report on this occasion.
Any questions, thoughts on that aspect? I think we know the Leader of the Council's view on the subject, but that seems to be at odds with the legal officers, so we'll leave that for them to resolve. With the public gallery clear now, Simon, yeah? I think, yeah, slow down. Okay. I think we can, we're safe to end the broadcast now, and thank the public for their patience tonight and for taking the time to listen in. Thank you.